On American Medicine Today, a hidden world of medicine most never see is revealed in a new memoir written by a cardiac anesthesiologist. Dr. David Alfery joins us to highlight his new book, Saving Grace. Next, Keith was suffering from a rare condition known as arachnoiditis. This caused severe spine pain. After seeking help from the Bonati Spine Institute, he's happy to be back to his active life pain-free. Finally, returning guest Larry Elder joins the show to discuss the latest in politics and his new show on the EPOCH Times. We have so much to discuss coming up on American Medicine Today.
Featuring cutting-edge science and medical innovation, touching personal stories of recovery from pain, along with political, social, and healthcare issues plaguing our nation. This is American Medicine Today, brought to you by the Bonati Spine Institute and Alfred Bonati, MD.
Welcome to American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Bonati alongside Ethan Euchre and world-renowned orthopedic surgeon Dr. Alfred Bonati. So a new memoir written by a leading cardiac anesthesiologist takes readers inside a hidden world of medicine that most of us never see. Joining us is Dr. David Alfery, MD, author of Saving Grace, What Patients Teach Their Doctors About Life, Death, and the Balance in Between. Welcome to the program, Dr. Alfery.
Thank you so much for having me.
So your book tells the story of how you went from a naive medical student to a caring senior physician and anesthesiologist who spent nearly 40 years in private practice. So what made you want to actually share your story?
Well, I finished this amazing 36-year career in private practice as a cardiac anesthesiologist in Nashville. And like most physicians, I had a lot of amazing things that happened, a lot of incredible experiences. And when I looked around to see if they had been described before, I found that almost nothing about this hidden world of the OR and the ICU had ever been written by an anesthesiologist. So I said, why don't I go ahead and divulge this secret world that I lived in? What makes us think, why we act the way we do, how we keep it together when everything's falling apart in the OR and so forth. So it's kind of an expose, really, of the world of anesthesia.
We're all aware that anesthesia needs to be administered during surgeries and things like that, but we don't really think about that process of what goes into that. It truly is a delicate science, correct?
Yeah, and it's really it's art and science. The science is the knowing the drugs, knowing how they act, how they're metabolized, how they what their half-life is, and so forth. And the art is putting it together. And so like all of medicine, it's a combination of art and science.
You also talk about kind of sitting in the waiting room during your own daughter's surgery, and you kind of had an epiphany. Why don't you explain that?
Yeah, when I went into medicine, I sort of thought I'd have this sort of leg up on everybody. That if I got sick or my family got sick, I'd have the inside knowledge and the inside track. And so I'd be able to navigate those waters better than anyone else, because after all, I knew all about it. But when I found my daughter was being operated on and she developed a life-threatening bleed called disseminated intravascular coagulopathy, I found I was just like every other family, absolutely helpless. And all of my knowledge and all of my experience really meant nothing. I was just at the mercy of her healthcare practitioners and how well they would do with her.
And then your book delves into what's described as the joy of saving a life, as well as the terror of having a life on the line, to the shock of an unexpected demise. Can you kind of walk us through what you're feeling from that perspective as the anesthesiologist in all three of those scenarios? Well,
you're a part of this team in the OR, and everybody has a role to play. And you're responsible for the stability and the hemodynamic stasis of the patient getting through the operation. You're just hoping that the patient will make it and the surgeon does their job well. There are situations where you think that there's very little chance of this making it out. Let's say it's a gunshot wound that comes in, and there's absolute joy and ecstasy when you can pull a patient through. You have other patients that go to the operating room and you think it's a routine operation. And if they perish during the case, it's absolutely devastating. And every time I went into an operation, I had this little background anxiety that disaster was just around the corner. So I had this sort of nervousness my entire career that I might somehow not do well with a patient. I have found that that's actually fairly common to doctors going through their career.
What was it that made you want to write the memoir, and what are you hoping that the readers take away from reading your book?
Well, it started out really as a deep dive into the secret world. Everything that you would see on TV, a medical drama, or read a medical romance novel was so inaccurate. And I wanted to tell a real story. But as I told it, I found that there were patient-doctor interactions that really demonstrated our shared humanity, what it is that makes us who we are, that brings us together. Some are characteristics, some are emotions, some are principles by which we live. But they're all the things that make us human. So at the end of the day, I hope the reader comes to see their own doctor in a new light and is able to focus on the fact that, while they're living their life, they're not going to live it forever.
Yeah.
And that the lessons that my patients taught me allow the reader to bring that into their own life and lead a richer life.
What are some of the discrepancies between what actually happens in the OR and what people see on TV? I'm curious.
Yeah, to me, what is classically shown on TV is the strong surgeon who's the captain of the ship. And if there's a crisis in the OR, somebody's heart stops, they will take over, and the anesthesiologist is very obsequious at the head of the table. Well, in fact, if somebody's heart stops in the operating room, the surgeon backs up, the anesthesiologist runs the code, calls the drugs, and leads the resuscitation. So it's just the opposite of what's shown on TV.
Do you have any personal stories or experiences, takeaways for readers of the book Saving Grace?
Well, there's one in particular. I was in Romania on a mission trip, and we had a little girl who had some syndactyly, which is webbing of the fingers, the sort of tissue between the fingers. And she had terrible, terrible club feet. And she had some other problems. And as she was coming out from anesthesia, she was crying. And I thought, oh gosh, I don't have enough narcotic on board. She's hurting. And I leaned down. I said, Lydia, are you hurting? And she shook her head. And I said, Lydia, are you in pain? And she shook her head. And I said, Lydia, why are you crying? And she said, I'm normal. I'm normal. And what she meant was her feet had been bent up with a screw put across the ankle. She'd be able to stand. She'd be able to walk with a staggering gait. She still had her syndactyly, but that was enough for her. And that just really set my whole perspective from then on about what I should expect in life.
And I would assume that's what makes being in the medical field so rewarding.
Well, it's one of the things, there's nothing better than the doctor-patient relationship. And one of the points that I wanted to bring out in the book was that the trust that patients give us, it really translates to the fact that being a physician is this great honor that there's no way that I could be more honored than a patient trusting me with their life. It's a privilege to be a physician.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Dr. David Alfery, thank you for sharing your story about your experiences in the OR.
Thank you.
Make sure you stay tuned. Coming up after the break, a story of recovery. Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonati created, perfected, and patented the Bonati Spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonati invented the precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonati Spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 75,000 procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Nearly half our patients suffer from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Visit askbonati.com.
My name is Keith Koenig, currently from Wichita, Kansas. I retired from mostly a desk job. It did involve some travel. I was responsible for getting in touch with all of the stakeholders in the state of Kansas at all the airports. My boss wanted me to travel from airport to airport, and he wanted me to walk around the terminal quite a bit, and I just couldn't walk. Before the pain, I'd play pickleball, I would grill, play with my dogs. 15 years ago, I could play tennis with my kids.
Keith suffered from more than one condition, resulting in loss of mobility and pain.
Doctors told me that I had degenerative disc disease, where My discs were just collapsing and started at L5, S1 and just continued working its way up. I have a rare condition called adhesive arachnoiditis. General medical practice says there's nothing they can do for you. You're going to lead a painful, miserable life. It would hinder my ability to do things. I may have to cut a walk short or something, or not ride my bike as long. I took a lot of pain medicines. I took a lot of muscle relaxers, and then there's medicines to counteract the effects that those have. I was in bed 16 hours a day. I'd get up breakfast, lunch, and dinner and be up for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and take another pain pill and try to get some rest.
Desperately looking for a resolution to his pain, Keith underwent numerous forms of treatment, including a spinal fusion.
I've had multiple surgeries prior to coming to Bonati. All of my lumbar was fused. Up to L2, L3 was my last fusion. I've had laminectomies. I've had ablations to kill the nerves. It would just point a pain in a new area. You know, as you fuse your spine, that joint becomes solid, and it transfers all its energy up to your next disc, and the next disc goes bad. You're going to need lots of opioids, which there seems to be a war on getting opioids for pain patients. I've also had shoulder replaced. I've got some neck issues.
After hearing about the Bonati Spine Institute in a support group for a spine condition, Keith decided to send in his MRI for review.
So I'm on a number of support groups, and someone asked the question on there that they had heard Dr. Bonati did a successful surgery on someone with arachnoiditis. Well, that was the first I'd ever heard of Bonati, so I did a research on it, and on his brochure, he addresses arachnoiditis. It was just a couple of days, and I heard from a patient advocate, and she told me how to submit my MRI. Down here, I was able to do that digitally. It was Dr. Bonati himself that called me, and after he had reviewed my MRI, he thought he could definitely help me, and he wanted me to come down here and make our plans from there. But he thought he could help. It made me hopeful. Hope is something that gets hard to find nowadays.
Keith, like thousands of other guests of the Bonati Spine Institute, found the efficiency of the evaluation process unlike anything he's encountered anywhere else.
That is a blessing. I mean, healthcare takes an eternity. I mean, if I need an MRI, first I got to get an appointment with like a neurosurgeon. That can take 3 months, you know. Then I see the neurosurgeon, he'll schedule me for an MRI. That'll take another 2 months. Then it'll take a month or two to get back with the neurosurgeon to review the MRI. Then if you need surgery, it's going to be another couple of months while they schedule the surgery. Here, when I came to Bonati, they did a little physical on me. They sent me over for MRI. It was the same day. They wheeled me over into the other buildings. I got a series of x-rays, and it wasn't just your basic x-rays. They took a ton of x-rays. They did the MRIs, and then I came back over to this building, and we reviewed the MRI the same day. That was amazing. Many of my problems was where I'd already been fixed.
On average, patients of the Bonati Spine Institute arrive for the evaluation on a Monday and are finished with their surgical summary on Friday of the same week.
And it was a little hard to believe that everything was going to get done for me at once in a week, that I was going to have 4 surgeries in a week.
The targeted Bonati spine procedures are performed incrementally using conscious IV sedation, where the patient remains awake and communicating with their surgeon to ensure their source of pain is eliminated.
You're part of the surgery. The doctor's right there. I see the doctor. My wife was in the room. She observed the my surgery. They've got screens set up. They got the screen that the doctor's looking at. They got a screen that the patient's looking at. And he has you do movements to see, did we get all the pain, as opposed to general open back surgery. They just take out a bunch of stuff, sew you back together, and wait 2 years to figure out if it worked for you or not. He fixed the areas that were fused by other doctors. Other doctors, once they fuse you, they're done with it. They're not going to help you at that location. That's all they do. That's where he went in and fixed me.
No pain. Now go up and down.
Yeah.
Up. No back pain.
No.
No leg pain.
No.
While in the recovery room, Keith is up and walking unassisted only a few minutes after his last exclusive Bonati Spine procedure.
The big thing was I just had the ability to walk. Walking for me was always risky, and I couldn't walk in a straight line, and now I can. And I walked without my cane this morning, and I walked in a straight line, so.
Keith compares the recovery process between traditional open back surgery to the minimally invasive Bonati spine procedures.
Back home, post-surgery, you're in a lot of pain. They've opened up your back. They've cut through muscles. You have to wear a brace. It's extremely difficult to move. You're in this brace for several weeks. You're in quite a bit of pain for 6 months. And to fully recover from open back surgery, you're waiting 2 years to see if the surgery was truly a success. Where with Bonati, you don't wear a brace. They tell me I can expect to feel fully recovered in 6 weeks. Based on my experience, I would recommend the Bonati Spine Institute, yes.
Keith is most looking forward to spending quality time with his family.
Going for a walk with my wife. So far in the last 2 years, the furthest I've walked is just past my next door neighbor's house and turn around and came back. So maybe I'll be able to walk all the way around the block. And I've got my son's wedding coming up at the end of May, and it just terrified me that, I would just be sitting in a wheelchair taking my pain pills, and that just sounded miserable. Now I'm figuring I'm going to be able to attend it. I'll be able to stand, and I won't be highly medicated. So this was a blessing.
I think everybody was shocked, like, really, you had surgery today? I had a drain tube. I was at my desk doing payroll for 200 employees, worked till night, got up, went to bed.
Actually, the recovery was great. I really immediately felt the difference. I was able to go back to work within a couple of days.
The progress after each procedure was amazingly good. The recovery, all told, has been phenomenal.
We went to the Bonati Institute, and that was the turning point in my life. This type of surgery is so much more advanced, and the recovery time is so much less that it's just a no-brainer.
6 days after surgery, I was back in the gym, slowly but surely working my way back to fighting, back to basically 100% of fighting, So 6 days, and everybody was in awe. Like, didn't you just get out of surgery? I'm like, yeah, I feel great. And like, okay, let's see how you do. And I was bowling with everybody, and I'm in the advanced class, so that sounds a lot right there.
First time I came in here was Monday, and today is Thursday. I've had 2 surgeries and am doing fantastic. I'm still in shock that I can walk. That's all within 4 days.
Bonati succeeds where others fail.
Welcome back to American Medicine Today. We're very excited to chat with our next guest. He's known for America's Truth Detector, and he's New York Times bestselling author of 4 books, host of the Larry Elder Show on the EPOCH Times, as well as founder of Political Action Committee, Elder for America. Thank you for joining us, Larry.
Kimberly, thank you so much for not calling me the black face of white supremacists.
How do you respond to that, by the way, before we even get into all the other stuff to talk about?
Honestly, it is so silly, it doesn't even deserve a response. But I was called that by a black female writer for the LA Times, and it was a big headline. It said, Larry Elder, this is during the recall campaign, Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. Subheadline, you've been warned. White women and children.
Well, I have never been prouder to have you on our program. There's been some noise about you planning on running for a presidential election in 2024. True or false?
Look at the smile on his face.
I am shocked, Kimberly, that you would actually believe what you read in the media.
It was on the internet. It's got to be true.
Yeah, the answer is yes. No kidding. I'm giving it very serious thought. And if I do run, and I'm pretty confident I will, it'll be sometime early April, sometime middle of April that I make my announcement. And I'm not doing it to displace Donald Trump, who I think is odds-on favorite to get the nomination, or Ron DeSantis. Either one of them would be just fine, and I would be very enthusiastically supporting either one of them. It's because I have other things I want to talk about that I don't think our side talks about enough. We know about the inflation. We know about the large number of people who've been paid not to work. We know about how bad the borders are. We know about how bad the schools are. These are issues we all know about. We all have somewhat different ways of approaching it, but we all know those are the issues. I bring a couple of things to the table I think the others don't. Number one is a large number of children who enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. 40% of all American kids now enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. It's because of the welfare state. We've incentivized women to marry the government. We've incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. It is far and away, as I said earlier, the number one social problem in America. And the left doesn't want to talk about it because they created it, and we don't want to talk about it because a lot of us are afraid of being called Uncle Toms or blaming the messenger, but it's got to be addressed. The second thing is the lie that America is systemically racist. It's a lie. You know it's a lie, but the Democrats do it all the time because they want black people to be angry and to vote based upon social justice as opposed to crime and bad schools and economics the way everybody else votes. So I can put a pin into that balloon, I think, in a way more authentically and persuasively than some of the others can, because I'm from the inner city. I've seen the damage done in households where there are no fathers, and my father didn't know his father, so it's not a death sentence, but it certainly is harder. So those are a couple of things I bring to the table that I think my other Republican compatriots do not.
Yes. Why do you think everything has become about race? I mean, you can't watch anything on the news without it being pointed out the race of the person. I mean, the damn Super Bowl, it was all about, for the first time ever, 2 black quarterbacks.
I don't see the need to even point it out. I've said this for years. After the election and re-election of the first black president, isn't anything else anticlimactic? Why? Because once it happens, we can now say America has, to the fullest extent possible, achieved his dream of people being able to be judged based upon the content of character rather than color of skin. That's the pinnacle. We're there. Can we knock it all off? And I'll tell you something about these Super Bowl quarterbacks. I tweeted the other day, we have 2 black quarterbacks going against each other. When one of them loses, is that going to be white supremacy?
The NFL is racist.
They'll find a way. They will find a way.
Lose, then what?
Right.
Getting back to the race thing, obviously the death of Tyree Nichols brought this all up. 5 officers fired, 5 were black.
Yes.
He's black. The police chief is black. Majority of the city is black. Majority of council in Memphis is black. And here we're talking about systemic racism. Yes. It is offensive. And one professor from Columbia said, this is an example of structural racism in that the police, quote, target black communities, close quote. But the reason they target black communities is because that's where the freaking crime is. Yes. Half of the homicides in America are committed by black people against other black people. You look at the largest 75 counties in America by population, 60% of the shootings, black, of the homicides black, of the robberies black. That's why the cops are there. And almost always the victims are other black people. And 81% of black people want the police manpower to remain the same or to be increased. They know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. That was a disaster. Yes. They defunded, then they refunded after they realized what was happening. Crime went through the roof, and it continues to. But then we're also seeing all these headlines about police recruitment is way down. Nobody wants to be a law enforcement officer anymore. And I understand why. It's exactly because of that.
And you're quite right about recruitment. Who wants to join the police department? If you're white, you're a white supremacist. If you're black, you're an Uncle Tom. If you're Hispanic, you're a Tio Taco. Shockingly, recruitment goes down. And again, the very people who are hurt by this are the very black and brown people, the people on the left, and they care about. The other thing that happened when you call the police systemically racist is what's called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect.
Yes.
Police pull back. They don't engage in proactive policing. And there's something called excess deaths. And it's been documented in just 5 cities. There are over 900 people who have died because of homicide, who otherwise would not have died had the police been in their normal presence and done proactive policing. So all you're doing is killing people who you claim that you care about, black and brown people. So Joe Biden and all the Democrats talk about defund the police and talk about systemic racism. They've got blood on their hands. Literally, they've got blood on their hands.
They certainly do. And, you talk about how our country's going the path of Marxism. Why? Why would we willingly do that?
You tell me. My friend Thomas Sowell, the economist, says Marxism and socialism has a record so abysmal, so full of failures. Only somebody who's a law professor who teaches sociology would recommend it. Look, the left is young people have a more positive view about socialism than they do about capitalism. Never mind all the goods and services they use were not produced because of socialism, they're produced because of capitalism. We have just done a bad job, meaning our side, of convincing people about the story of America, about entrepreneurship, hard work, and about capitalism, and the dismal record of socialism. You look at East Germany and West Germany.
Yes.
Look at North Korea and South Korea. Look at Cuba and South Miami. We have real-world experiments where socialism has been tried right next to the same people, same ethnicity, same history, and you're seeing the differences.
And I think part of that is because they're trying to introduce things like critical race theory. They're trying to confuse the kids. They're trying to indoctrinate them to question who they are, what sex they are.
Nationwide, according to the America's, what's called their national report card, 85% of black 13-year-olds, these are 8th graders, 85% are neither math nor reading grade proficient. Half of them are not even basic reading proficient, which means a large number of black 13-year-olds are functionally illiterate. Shockingly, there's a high unemployment. Shockingly, many of them cannot compete in our digital age.
Right.
Larry, because we're out of time, go ahead and pop your shows so where people can find you.
Larry with EPOCH, EPOCH.com, Larry with EPOCH.com. Follow me on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Truth Social.
All right, we will. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you so much, Larry Elder.
Thanks, Larry.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take great care. That wraps up this edition of American Medicine Today. Check us out on Newsmax Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern. And for previous episodes, head over to YouTube and search American Medicine Today.
If you have any comments or questions, contact us at the number below. You can tweet at Dr. Bonati using hashtag American Medicine Today or hashtag AMT. We would like to hear from you.